So how many remember what we talked about last week? Yes? No? Okay. We talked about, we opened up by talking about demons, remember? And from Genesis 6 and how a first century Jewish person believed that demons are the disembodied spirits of the dead giants, the dead Nephilim, that was what they believed demons were. And we talked about how that's a possibility and different options like that, right? We discussed that. And so then we introduced the Tower, the Babel story of Genesis 11 and how God divided up the nations according to the number of the sons of God, Deuteronomy 32. And so what we finished with last week was talking about Jesus referencing Psalm 82 in John chapter 10. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to just kind of continue on walking through the Babel thing and what happened and how it applies to us today. Sound good? All right. So this is, there we go. This is going to be what is a hierarchy of the kingdom of darkness or the world system that we battle against, all right? So this is what it looks like is you got Satan, devil, and he's called the ruler of this world, 1 John 5:19. And that's Genesis chapter 3. He comes along. He sort of initiates the whole kingdom of darkness. Then you got the next level, which is rulers, powers, principalities, and heavenly places. We see that in Genesis 11. That's what we're going to talk about today. And then we see that demons and unclean spirits are at the bottom down there. I put Genesis 6 because we're just going to take what the first century Jewish person believed about demons. That's what we're going to kind of run with, all right? So this is the hierarchy. This is sort of how it operates. Does that make sense? All right, so Satan's over the kingdom of darkness. He has angels under him, right? The hell is prepared for the devil and his angels. So we see that. These angels that he has are messengers. That's what that word angel means, messenger. This is who they are. Rulers and powers are the ones we wrestle against, okay? Demons are the lowest level, though, all right? Jesus says they're like serpents and scorpions. I've given you authority over them and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall harm you, right? So he describes them as a lesser sort of being, all right? And so go to the next slide here. We're going to talk about what we see here last week. We're not going to read all this, but this is the Tower of Babel. And it says, when Deuteronomy 32, 8 and 9, when the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. But the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob his allotted heritage. All right? And then we see what happens in Psalm 82. These rulers that he put over them lead the people into wickedness and rebellion. They don't do right by God. They rebel, and then God comes along and says, nevertheless, he judges them. Verse 6, I said, you are gods, son of the Most High, all of you. And nevertheless, like men, you shall die and fall like any prince. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for you shall inherit the nations. And who comes along to inherit the nations? Jesus, right? Awesome. That's what he came to do, all right? So this is what we're seeing here, okay? What we're going to look at today is what is God's solution for this rebellion of these sons of God that's here. So what we're going to see is that God's going to use his kingdom to go out and begin to reclaim the nations already through the Old Testament, okay? And so we see here that he's going to use his kingdom. Genesis 12, the Lord said to Abram, right? Genesis 12 comes right after Genesis 11, divided up the nations, and he says, but Israel, or Jacob is my allotted heritage, and then Abram comes along, Genesis 12. This is what we see here. This is what he tells them. Go from your country and your kindred to your father's house, and all the way down to verse 3. I will bless those who bless you. In him who dishonors you, I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So you see the Lord raising up Abram to go and bless all the nations, bring the nations back. We see Genesis 22, he reiterates it. In your seed, verse 18, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Okay, go to the next slide. We see it again here. The Lord said, shall I hide from Abram what I'm about to do, seeing that Abraham shall surely be a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed by him. And then we see this is Jacob coming along, and he is blessing Judah. Remember Judah? Okay, he comes along and he blesses Judah. Look what he says to Judah. Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's cub. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He stooped down, he crouched as a lion and as a lioness. Who dares rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah. A scepter is a ruler, right? A scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him, and to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. That word peoples there is nations. Now, who is he talking about here? Who comes from the line of Judah? Jesus. So this is thousands of years before Jesus comes along. There's a blessing from Jacob onto Judah saying, this is what the promise is to Judah, that the obedience of the nations will come from your line. Okay, we see that? All right, go to the next slide. Okay, here we go. That's where we're going to jump in, all right? So we see this. God's going to use his kingdom to start going out and blessing the nations and transforming the nations through his people throughout the Old Testament, okay? What we see in these passages is that God was already starting his strategy, all right? Throughout the Old Testament, Israel was never defeated and never lost a war or a battle unless they were rebellious or sinful. Okay? They won every battle that God sent them into, unless they sinned, rebelled, idolatry, and things like that, and God would say, okay, you're not going to win. But every other time, they won. Why? Because God was on their side, right? He was using them to go out into the world and transform the nations around them through his kingdom, okay? They were the prominent and preeminent nation because they had the Most High God on their side, right? So what we see here, though, is this, is that God gives them a warning. When you go out and do this, you're going to go into different nations. You're going to dispossess them. You're going to take authority over these nations. When you do, though, be very careful, because there are other gods in these nations, other beings in these nations. You need to be very careful that you don't go and you serve them. Deuteronomy 4, beware not to lift up your eyes to heaven and see the sun and the moon and the stars and all the host of heaven and be drawn away and worship them and serve them. Those which the Lord your God has allotted to all the peoples under the whole heaven. Do you see that? He's allotted that to the rest of the nations. But to you, he says, but the Lord has taken you and brought you out from the iron furnace, from Egypt, to be a people for his own possession as today. So when you go in these nations, you'll know who you are. You are my people, right? He says it again, Deuteronomy 12. When the Lord your God cuts off before you the nations which you are going in to dispossess, and you dispossess them and dwell in their land, beware that you are not ensnared to follow them after they are destroyed before you, and that you do not inquire after their gods, saying, how do these nations serve their gods, that I also may do likewise? You shall not behave thus toward the Lord your God, for every abominable act which the Lord hates they have done for their gods, for they even burned their sons and daughters in the fire to their gods. Okay? So he's saying, you are my nation, you are my people, you are my kingdom. You're going to go into nations, dispossess them, but you need to be careful because there's going to be people that are going to try to draw you away. These other rulers and spiritual beings and the people that follow them are going to try to pull you away from being my people. And we see that, do we not, throughout the whole Old Testament, right? Sometimes they don't, sometimes they do. There's this remnant that stays loyal a lot of the times, but there's a lot of them that go after the other gods. They begin to serve the other gods, go after the Baal, sacrifice on the high places. You know, they start doing these things over and over again, disregarding what God had told him here, right? All right, so this right here is the crux of spiritual warfare, okay? The people of Israel were God's possession, but they were going into different nations with different gods. There was going to be a temptation for them to become like those different groups of people. But what we see over and over again is that when they were taken into captivity, even in Babylon, remember they were taken into captivity, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were still Hebrews. Were they not? They were still Jews, weren't they? They were living in a foreign land, taken captive, but they knew who they were. We will not bow to the God. We will not bow to this idol because we serve the Most High God as they're living in a foreign land. Doesn't that sound like us? We live in a foreign land, and this is the crux. This is very, very important. We're going to talk about this a lot next week. This is super important when it comes to spiritual warfare. If you do not know that you are a citizen of heaven, you will be led astray by other rulers, principalities, and heavenly places. That's the premise. That's the baseline. We have to have that down as an understanding, okay? These rulers and principalities and world forces and heavenly places, they work through control, okay? They work through control. The people of other nations burned their children to their gods. That's what they did. They sacrificed their children by burning them to their gods. Why would they do that? Because the God told them to. God told that whatever their God was, told them, this is what you're going to do to serve me. You will sacrifice your children to me. And they obeyed, right? Because that's the nation. That's their God. The God told us to do this. This is what we do, right? And the Israelites are going into these nations and seeing these things happen. And sometimes they may be led astray to do the same thing. This is pretty crazy stuff, isn't it? Because the spiritual rulers, they try to control the masses through fear and oppression. Okay, what we wrestle against is principalities that try to rule us through fear and oppression, okay? They control the human population by creating and operating what we call the world system that every human lives in. We cannot control the nations that we live in and the rulers that are over those nations, but we can control whether or not we submit to their ways and their schemes. Can we not? We can't control the nation. We live in America. There are spiritual principalities over the nation of America. Yeah. Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think abortion goes along with you're sacrificing them to the god of selfishness, you could say, right? Or whatever. Yeah. There's something that's there. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Right. But I think the premise is that the reason why is that there are spiritual rulers. So there are spiritual beings over the nation of America. We live in America. And are we more American than we are citizens of the kingdom of God? That's the question we have to ask. Which one are we? Are we citizens of heaven or are we Americans more? Because there's going to come a time where we're going to have to make a decision. Because the rulers and principalities in heavenly places are going to continue to infiltrate and try to control the people that are under the nation in which we live, whatever nation that may be. They're going to continue to try to control that, and we're going to have to know who we are. Are we Hebrews living in Babylon? Or are we Babylonians living in Babylon? Right? Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I was asked a question there was direction from you at two different levels. One from your belief, or one from your homeland, like where you were born, raised. Which of those would be a higher standard for you? I told my belief, my highest. And his response was, his is other.
The homeland would dictate what he decides to do.
Because the homeland is the homeland does not change. The belief
Can.
So it's interesting how
Very. Very.
to make it sound logical, but in reality, it's not.
Yeah.
But the belief
Right.
and the partial truth that they use God's word.
Yeah. Right. That's good. No, that is good. Because here's the thing. God has created human beings, us as human beings. Okay? That to be human does not mean that to be human is not a sin. Does that make sense? To be human is not a sin. Because God created humans and said it's good. Did he not? He created us as human beings and said, it's good. This is my family, my earthly family. I have a heavenly family. I have a spiritual family, angels. I want to create human family down here on earth that go out, and he says, I will create them in my image. And then he sends us out to go and advance his kingdom, Adam and Eve, go out and advance my kingdom. What is he saying to do there? He's saying, take my image and go and image it out to the world. Okay, and we've talked about this a lot, or this book a lot, but The Unseen Realm that is written by a guy named Michael Heiser talks about this, and he does an excellent job of saying human beings are called to be imagers. That's what they're called to be, imagers of God. That's the purpose of why we've been created. We're called to go out and image God everywhere we go. The reason why that's important is because these rulers and principalities do not want us to go forth and image God. They don't want that. You know why? Because they know that at one day coming, we will judge even angels. 1 Corinthians 6:3 says that, does it not? Do you not know that you will judge angels? So the reason why they're doing what they're doing to try to control us is that they're trying to dehumanize us. Because to be human is not a sin. Now, humans will sin, right? I mean, it's impossible to not sin as human beings, right? Because of the nature and all that kind of stuff. But this is why it's important, though, because they're trying to control us and to keep us from going forth and imaging God to the earth. This is a big, it's kind of the big strategy of what they're doing here, okay? So let me just give you an example here real quick of this. We're going to talk a little bit more practical things next week. But during 2020, when we had the whole thing with COVID that happened, okay? This was a spiritual tactic by spiritual beings, okay? And the way that we know this is because they said, the best thing that you can do for your dying grandma is to stay away from her. The best thing you can do for your neighbor is to not talk to them. The best thing you can do for your kids is to put a mask on them, which completely removed the ability for them to communicate with nonverbal communication that they desperately needed. The best thing you can do to not kill everyone on the planet is to not go to church. The best thing you can do is to get vaccinated to slow the spread, and you won't get this deadly disease. Even if you have had the virus and you have natural immunity, you still must get the vaccine in order to not kill your neighbor. And if you go against these things, you are evil, you are hateful, and you are wicked. Okay? Now, this is what was put out there. Understand, okay? Now, I'm not saying anything about whether got vaccinated, wear mask. It doesn't matter to me. What I'm saying is there were so many people that got caught up in this, and they thought, this right here, 2020, this is the enemy attacking us. No, it was just the beginning of where we're finding ourselves at now as a nation. What it was the beginning of this division that we have in our nation, where now it's so divided because there's people on one side that look at the people who didn't abide by everything that was being told to them, and they look at them and they say, you were willing to kill me. You were willing to kill me. Now I'm willing to kill you. We're seeing division happen in this nation. Why? Because there's a spiritual attack that came upon this nation to divide the nation in a level it's never been divided in a long time, the way that it's going right now. We have to understand, this is it's reality. There was a plan of Satan to try and divide the nation of America through these rulers and principalities there to where now we are living in that result right now. Does that make sense? We're seeing this happen right now, okay? Because they said during 2020 that to go to church would kill people, but to riot in the streets was okay, which meant they believed social justice was worth dying for, but church was not. Do you see? Okay, so there's this divide that has happened now, that this is how these spiritual beings work, is they're trying to, because look, like the nation of India, let's say, right? The nation of India has a lot of upheaval, but a lot of it is because of political things and against Pakistan and different things like that. Other nations in Africa, there may be economic division that they bring, okay? But some of the big nations like our nation and like the UK, they're going to use different tactics here than they do in India or Africa, because they know what they need to do. They're trying to divide, and their purpose is, let's dehumanize people on both sides, where we see each other as non-human. So we don't care about their feelings, we don't care about what they do. They're not human on either side. This is what they're trying to do, okay? And we're going to talk about this a little bit more next week, all right? So we don't have to talk about it that much, but hopefully that proves a little bit of a point, okay? Okay, so then let's go to the next slide here, because what we're going to do is we're going to jump into the New Testament, and we're going to see how Jesus comes along, and he becomes the Lord of the nations. Now, the promises, Galatians 3, were made to Abraham and to his offspring. It does not say into offsprings, referring to many, but referring to one, into your offspring, who is Christ. So the promises we just read in Genesis 12 and all those other ones, they apply to who? Christ. He is the offspring that has come along to inherit the nations. We see Luke, this is Simeon. What does Simeon say whenever he sees Jesus? Lord, you're now letting your servant depart in peace according to your word, for my eyes have seen your salvation that you have prepared in the presence of all peoples, a light for revelation to the Gentiles and for glory to your people Israel. He saw Jesus coming and saying, this is the light to the Gentiles. That's weird, right? This is a Jewish man. Why is he saying that? Because they understood the messianic promise was somebody was going to come to reclaim the nations. Not just save people, to bring us to heaven. That's part of it. But he's coming to inherit the nations by destroying these spiritual rulers, okay? Now let's look at the, go ahead.
Where does he get that?
The Old Testament, yes, Psalm 82, that, "O Lord, arise." Yes, right. But yes. And so let's look at this term real quick of the term Most High, because whenever you read something in the New Testament, it's supposed to sort of point you back to something in the Old Testament, sometimes, okay? So let's look at this term Most High. We see it used here, Deuteronomy 32:8, when the Most High, and then we see it here with Jesus, the angel Gabriel. He comes and he says, "He will be great and be called the Son of the Most High, and the Lord God will give to him the throne of his father, David." So every time, this term is to denote that there is only one Most High God. That's the purpose. Most High God means there's only one, okay? The Most High is the Most High. Every time Jesus is called Son of the Most High God by someone, and not just referenced, in discussion about who he is, but actually called it is used by a supernatural being. That's interesting. So every time that they're talking about it's supernatural beings, they're referring to, like Angel Gabriel is referring to him as the Son of the Most High God, which should point us back to where? Deuteronomy 32:8, Psalm 82, when the Most High divided up the nations, right? It should kind of point us back to this area here. Then this is a demon speaking here. And crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" Right? This is a demon speaking, not a person, a demon, referring to Jesus as Son of the Most High God. All right, go to the next slide. There we go. When he saw Jesus, another one, he cried out and fell down before him and said with a loud voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." We see in Acts 16, this is the woman with the spirit of divination. She followed Paul and us crying out, "These men are servants of the Most High God, who proclaim to you the way of salvation." This is another spirit speaking through a woman, a spirit of divination. So you see they're referencing Jesus as the Son of the Most High God, which should automatically point us back to Deuteronomy 32 and Psalm 82, okay? Go to the next one. We're going to see another one, another title of the Son of David. The title of Son of David is only found in the Synoptic Gospels, and it's always associated with healing or casting out demons. So every time Jesus is called Jesus, Son of David, it's because of healing or because of casting out of demons, okay? There's a reason why the people would call Jesus Son of David after these events. So we see Matthew chapter 12 here. Sorry, that one's in blue. Then a demon-oppressed man who was blind and was mute was brought to him and healed him, so that the man spoke and saw. And all the people were amazed and said, "Can this be the Son of David?" Okay, so they see healing and they reference him as this the Son of David. So they're pointing back to David here. "Behold, a Canaanite woman from that region came out and was crying, 'Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David. My daughter is severely oppressed by a demon.'" So she's referring to Jesus as Son of David here, okay? So why would a first century Jew be predisposed to the thought that the Son of David, the Messiah, would have authority over demons? Why did they associate Jesus as he had authority over demons? They saw that. Why would they reference that to David, though? Now, healing makes sense, okay? Because Isaiah 61 speaks about healing that's going to come through the Messiah, right? We see that. But we don't see anything clear in the Old Testament that really, really makes it abundantly clear that when the Messiah comes, he's going to cast out demons. Now, there's some references of things that you can now we see, and we're like, oh, that's probably talking about spiritual things and beings and stuff like that, like the oppressed, setting free those who are oppressed, and we're like, okay, that's probably what that is. But why do we not see that abundantly clear there? One of the reasons is because God has a divine strategy of what he's doing. There are certain things in the Old Testament that we think are just abundantly clear now. Back then, it wasn't abundantly clear. And there's a reason why. Is because the Lord's trying to bring about his kingdom through Jesus, through the cross and the resurrection, that they didn't know exactly what was going to be happening. But what we see is this, okay? Do we ever see David casting out a demon? Okay, good. So 1 Samuel 16, Saul has an evil spirit that was sent from who? It was sent from the Lord. So, yeah. Sent from the Lord to torment him, okay? Because he rebelled and stuff like that. And so it's very interesting. God has authority, doesn't he? So it says this. So when David played, when the harmful spirit from God was upon Saul, David took the lyre and played it with his hands, so Saul was refreshed and was well, and the harmful spirit departed from him. So we see this right here. So, okay, we see one example, but we don't see much of anything else. But if a first century Jewish person, if you would have understood things that we have now found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, they understood that there was a lot that David did actually against unclean spirits, and especially Solomon. Solomon did a lot when it came to casting out demons, okay? Solomon, it says in 1 Kings 4 that Solomon, the son of David, and he is a messianic figure himself, wrote 3,000 proverbs, okay? It's 1 Kings chapter 4, 29 through 34 says he wrote 3,000 proverbs and 1,000 songs. Now, we don't have those in the Bible, okay? But it says he wrote those things, okay? King Solomon, the original son of David, was widely regarded in ancient Jewish literature, like the Testament of Solomon and the writings of Josephus, as a master of controlling and casting out demons. Josephus speaks about Solomon in the Jewish antiquities, and he credits King Solomon with God-given knowledge to cast out demons, a skill intended for the benefit and healing of men. And so it says, Josephus writes about how he witnessed a man named Eleazar in the presence of the emperor Vespasian and his troops exorcise a demon, okay, he sees this, by holding a ring which had a root prescribed by Solomon to the nostrils of the possessed person. Josephus writes about this, and he says, I saw this happen. He had a ring, and it had some sort of root that came from Solomon that it used. That's pretty crazy, huh? I'm not saying, I don't know, maybe it didn't happen, but he saw it. And he writes about it. It's a historical document, something that he writes, that he saw happen. That's pretty crazy, huh? All right. But the same goes for David. The Psalms mentions the Psalms of David that he wrote, but what we have in our Bible is not all that he wrote. Same thing with Solomon, okay? And so what we're going to see is this right here. Go to the next slide. This right here is a Dead Sea Scroll, 11Q, which means it was found in the 11th cave in Qumran. So this was what was here. We're not going to read all that, but look down here. It talks about the things he wrote, all these songs and different types of writings. And it says there in number 10 there, it says, "In songs to be sung over the possessed, 4." So it says that he wrote 4 of these things, that 4 psalms that were going to be sung over the possessed. Okay, so go to the next slide. This is one of them here. 11Q11, column 2, written about 100 to 150 BC. It says, invoke the name, well, it was written in the Dead Sea Scrolls at that time, but they took this from other documents here. Invoke the name of Yahweh to set him free from every affliction of the spirits of the devils, Liliths, owls, and jackals. Now, that Lilith, owl, and jackal sounds like animals. But in their mindset, these were desert creatures. Desert creatures were attributed to being demons in their mindset, okay? So when you go to Psalm 91, you see different things that are written there. We're going to see that in a second. They're referencing things that are animals, but they're not animals in their mindset. They're believing them to be spiritual beings. These are the devils, and the prince of enmity is Belial, another name for Satan, who rules over the abyss of darkness. We see another one here. When Belial comes upon you, you shall say to him, who are you, cursed among men and amongst the seed of the holy ones? Your face is a face of futility. Your horns are horns of a wretch. You are darkness and not light, sin and not justice. Against you, the chief of the army, Yahweh will shut you in the deepest Sheol. He will shut the 2 bronze gates through which no light penetrates. On you there shall not shine the light of the sun, which rises upon the just man to illuminate his face. Now these are writings of David, attributed to David wrote these psalms. That's here. Pretty cool, huh? So we see, it seems like he's got some authority. Speaking directly to Satan in the name of Yahweh with authority, right? So we see that it said 4. The 4th one that was found in the cave was Psalm 91. Okay? So that was one of the other ones. It's a little jar of psalms for the possessed. And one of them was Psalm 91. We're going to see that here in a second if we get there, okay? But I want to show you this next one here. This one's actually pretty cool. So this one was written not by David. This was written by the Essenes. The Essenes, there are 4 different sects of Judaism at the time of Jesus, okay? There's the Pharisees and the Sadducees. We know those ones, right? Then there's the Zealots, which were kind of like just crazy army dudes who wanted to kill everybody and like take make Judaism by force. And then there was the Essenes. The Essenes lived in the desert. They were kind of desert-dwelling Jewish people. And they believed in prophecy, and they believed they were the true line of Judaism, that the Pharisees and Sadducees had corrupted the law. They weren't doing it right. They were the only ones that were doing it right. There are some who believe that John the Baptist, when he was sent into the wilderness, into the desert, that he was with the Essenes. Some people believe that, okay? Everybody good? Y'all following me? Okay, good. All right. So this one right here was written here about the coming Melchizedek. This was a prophecy that was written about the coming Melchizedek. This Melchizedek will come to proclaim the year of Jubilee to the captives and release them from the debt of all their sins. This one that is coming is to make an atonement for sin for all the sons of light and the people who are predestined to this Melchizedek. He is coming to bring the day of salvation. He will come to deliver those that are captive to Belial and all the spirits under Belial. That's pretty interesting. 100 BC, they found this about somebody who was coming called the coming Melchizedek, right? You know where that's written about Melchizedek in the book of Hebrews? As Jesus coming, as the next one, right? So this is pretty interesting. But what we see here is that they believed in their mindset. All I'm trying to show you is this. What was their mindset? Their mindset was this one that's coming is not going to just bring freedom and forgiveness for sins, but he's also going to come and destroy Belial and all those who work for Belial. You see, this was their mindset. They understood this, okay? And so let's look real quick at the first thing that Jesus does, okay? When Jesus comes onto the scene, he's baptized. What is the first thing that Jesus goes and does after his baptism? He's sent into the wilderness. The first thing, okay? And that's important, all right? So look at what we see here. Is that the first mission of Jesus is that he's going to confront Satan on Satan's turf. Okay? So this is the location. Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And after 40 days, fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. The wilderness was seen as the domain of the demonic, the domain of darkness. That's what they thought in the Old Testament. So Jesus is being sent out into the wilderness where Satan dwelt. It's kind of his domain, and he's confronting him there. Okay, by entering the desert for 40 days, Jesus was essentially storming the beaches of the enemy territory to begin the process of taking back authority over the earth. That's the first thing that Jesus does. Pretty cool. Now, we see that, we talked about this a few weeks ago, about Azazel is a being in Leviticus 16 who lived in the desert. And so Jesus is going out there to be the goat, the scapegoat that was sent into the wilderness to Azazel the figure. Jesus is going out there to confront this figure in the wilderness as the conquering lamb. Is that cool? That's what's happening there. He's going out there to confront him. Just as Israel spent 40 years in the wilderness and failed to trust God, Jesus spent 40 days in the same environment and succeeded. So he is the faithful son, and he's proving that by going out and doing the same thing that the Israelites did and they failed to do over 40 years. Jesus is doing it in 40 days there. You see the connection there? Okay. And it's interesting because in Mark's Gospel of Mark chapter 4, he includes that he was in the wilderness and he was with the wild animals. That's weird. Who cares? You know, why? Well, like I said, because he's trying to point back to something. They believe that the wild animals were like demons, you know. This is where the domain of the demonic was. You know, jackals will kill you, owls are freaky, and they come out at night, you know, and Liliths are weird, you know, and there was Lilith is a songbird, okay, but Lilith is a demon of the Old Testament that they believed was, well, I'm not going to say it because there's kids in here, but there was, she would do things at night that were bad. Okay? So what we see here is that Jesus is the second Adam, or the last Adam, and he's beginning to restore peace that was lost in Eden. The peace that was lost in Eden by Satan is now being restored by Jesus. Okay? So let's look at the first temptation here. The first temptation. The tempter came and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But he answered, "It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." Satan says, if you are the Son of God, Okay? Command these stones to become bread. What Satan's doing here is he's trying to see, are you just an angel? Are you just a son of God? Or are you the son of God? Okay? And Jesus is going to prove, I am the son of God because I'm going to conquer you and I'm not going to obey you. Instead, I'm going to go through the death, resurrection. That's how I'm going to defeat you, actually, right? But he's inquiring, are you just a being or are you the son of God? And he demonstrates that he is. And then Jesus quotes from Deuteronomy 8:3. Deuteronomy 8 is where we see the worldview come about, Deuteronomy 32 worldview. And he's quoting Deuteronomy. He quotes Deuteronomy almost every time except for Psalm 91. He's pointing back that he is the faithful son that Israel failed to be here. Yes? Yes. Yeah, because I don't believe that, no, Satan is not all-knowing at all, absolutely. And that's why I believe in 1 Corinthians, we're going to talk about it in a couple of weeks, but in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, or 2 or 3, I can't remember, it talks about that if the rulers of this age would have known, they would have never crucified the Lord of glory. Okay? Now, I believe it's talking about two different people there. Actual rulers, people that didn't know that he was the Son of God. Obviously, we see that they didn't know that, right? They wouldn't have done that. Or maybe they would have still. But I also believe it's talking about spiritual rulers. They did not fully know the plan of God, of what was going to happen. Now, we look at it and we're like, Isaiah 53, Isaiah 54, it's so obvious. It's right there. I mean, come on. It wasn't obvious. And there's a reason why. Is because Jesus is coming along to basically declare to them, I'm going to defeat you through the death and resurrection. And we're going to see that here in a second. The next temptation, he's going to prove, I'm going to do it through a means that you don't see coming. And so, yes, I believe this is what is happening here. Who are you? Yeah. Right. No. Mm-hmm. Yes, because no, he's not fully knowing. No, not all knowing. Right. No, Satan is not. No, I don't believe that he is. No. I don't believe that he's fully understanding exactly who and what Jesus is going to do. Because at the end, remember, Jesus is on the cross and he's hanging on the cross and he says, come down. Well, people start to say, come down and save yourself. If you really are the Son of God, come down and save yourself. But they didn't understand that it's through the death on the cross he's going to actually get victory. Yeah. And so what we see here in the next temptation number 2, is the devil took him up to the holy city and set him on the pinnacle of the temple and said to him, if you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you. On their hands he will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone. Jesus said to him, again it is written, you shall not put the Lord God to test. So Jesus is quoting from where? Here. Psalm 91. Okay? Satan is quoting from Psalm 91. He's trying to tempt Jesus by saying, doesn't Psalm 91 say that if you throw yourself down, that God will command his angels concerning you and that he will protect you? Just throw yourself down and just test that to see if it's true. You know what's really interesting is that Satan leaves off verse 13 of Psalm 91. You know what verse 13 says? Verse 13, it says, you will tread on the lion and the adder, the young lion and the serpent you will trample underfoot. So he quotes 11 and 12, and he doesn't quote verse 13. Pretty interesting, huh? Like, I don't want that one in there, because I am the serpent. I don't know if you're the Son of God, but if you are, you're probably going to crush me, and I don't want to deal with that. And so he omits that verse conveniently. But he's quoting from a psalm, like I said, that was found amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls of exorcism psalms. So he was very familiar with this psalm, and he heard it probably for centuries, over and over and over again, and he's trying to use it as a temptation. Okay, and then once again, Jesus quotes from Deuteronomy 6, verse 16, pointing back to this time right here. The last temptation, he took him up to a very high mountain, showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory, and he said to him, all these I will give you if you fall down and worship me. Then Jesus said to him, begone, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him who you shall serve, him only shall you serve. And the devil left him, behold, angels came and were ministering to him. So Satan took Jesus up to a high mountain This is Satan using his home field advantage because the high places were the places where idol worship took place. By refusing the kingdoms on that mountain, Jesus prepared the way for his own high mountain moment, which would be the transfiguration, where he would later stand on a mountain, we talked about this a few weeks ago, of Mount Hermon, and declare his glory to his disciples, effectively invading the seat of the rebels. But notice that Satan's offer was a real, legit offer that he was giving to Jesus of the nations. Okay? Why? Because Satan had authority over the nations. Okay? So he's not offering him something that he can't give. He's offering him something that he has, which is, I have authority over the nations. If you bow down and worship me, I'll give it to you. Okay? But notice that Jesus is going to reclaim the nations, not through rebellion, but he's going to do it through his death and resurrection. That's the way he's going to reclaim the nations. And he's going to render the enemy without authority. Okay? All right. What's the next slide? Let's just wait. Yeah. Go ahead. Sure, go ahead.
Hey, going back to your earlier statement, about the nations, the disease that happened during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
What will be your perspective? Because I actually heard church leaders kind of speak to like Romans 13, 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
About, well, hey, by the way, we're supposed to be subject to the authorities and things like that. How do we reconcile that? Because I think, to me, what was crazy also about 2020 was not just the division among church and government, but somehow the division that was happening even within the church. I think there was
Sure.
kind of a friction. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So, I mean, we are commanded to obey in Romans 13, to obey governing authorities. But only to the extent that they're not trying to rise up above the law of God, right? And so we see that in the book of Acts, that we must obey God rather than men. If there comes to a point where the government begins to mandate for us to do things that go against God's word, it's not that we can disobey if we want to, we must. We don't have a choice because we are citizens of heaven first and foremost. And so if they ever come to that point, we must disobey the same way we see in the book of Acts. Now we have to be careful with that. We can't use that for everything that we don't like. No, that's not what that means. But it's when it begins to go against the word of God of you cannot gather together to worship the Lord. Well, we are commanded to not forsake the assembly together. Now, obviously, and during that time, I believe there was just a heightened level of deception within the nation that did lead us to a point now of division. But what I want us to see is that it's not division amongst people. We do not wrestle against flesh and blood. We wrestle against rulers and principalities. So what we need to do is see what was happening, what took place in the spiritual realm during that time, and how are we dealing with the repercussions of that today. And I believe the division is so, it's getting more and more, the divide is so big now that we have to just have a heavenly mindset with dealing with the things of this world and the things of this nation, any nation that we live in. Yeah. But yes, we are commanded to obey governing authorities over those things. Yes.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Make that point because I think there's this kind of call that God has on us to listen. As much as you can, you need to live at peace.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's kind of
Absolutely. Live at peace with all men. Yes.
Of peace wherever you go.
Right.
But definitely, to your point, I think we should, even within the church, sometimes it gets really gray. But when you start crossing the line of like all of a sudden now the authorities is too much, and what they're doing is it's the frog in the kettle thing.
Yeah.
It's little by little.
Yes.
Little by little. Don't go to church. All right. No. So it's kind of increasing.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got to be sharp in having the conversation amongst ourselves and going,
Right.
I think we're actually the frog in the kettle. Like,
Yes.
When is the right time for us?
Right.
As a church body, as a family, to say no.
Yes, because and you're right, because the fastest growing religion in America today is politics, by far. And because of that, we see right here, Matthew 24:14, that we're not fulfilling this mandate as the church because we want to talk about politics too much. But yet it's through the gospel and the advancement of the kingdom of God that the end will come, which then ushers in the destruction, ultimate destruction of Satan, demons, and the rulers and principalities. And that we play a role in that. And that's our job. Go ahead. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not about anything about what was done, like getting vaccinated or wearing. I don't care about any of that stuff. What I'm saying is that we have to see that right there was a spiritual attack on our nation to try to lead us into a division that we're now facing today, where you can't even have a conversation with the other side. I mean, it's completely gone. Go ahead, Bill.
I think that dealing with all of this, and we're using the COVID thing as an example.
We could have used a lot of stuff. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right.
I can guarantee you that in the Christian church, substantially connected Christians, there are those who are adamant, I'm getting the vaccine. There are those who are adamant, I am not getting the vaccine. And the devil will try to use those two ends to divide the church.
Absolutely.
And you can take any kind of political issue. Now, of course, there's some political issues that
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
But he'll use things like that to
Yes.
divide us whenever we shouldn't even be really discussing them at that level.
Right.
We can't discuss them.
Yes.
At that level.
But not to the point
We're
dividing.
gonna protect you because you don't get vaccinated and vice versa.
Yes. Yeah. Like in essentials, unity, and what is it? In non-essentials, liberty. Right? Like that's a non-essential thing, that there's freedom within those types of things. Go ahead. Yeah.
I saw a video the other day of this preacher on the street, and he was preaching. This woman comes up to him. He's trying to touch his hand, and they were just talking about it in the video. Oh, she was trying to church on him. A preacher evangelist on the street. My thought is, first of all, can she even put a curse on this Holy Spirit-filled man, the greater he that's in the world, and him even in the world? And can a Christian open a door to demon possession?
So number one, in the original Greek, the word possession is not in there. Okay, the word means to be demonized. All right, and so they translate demon possession because there's obviously examples of people that are seemingly fully possessed, but the word means to be demonized. Can Christians be demonized to where they allow an evil spirit to speak to them and they begin to believe the lies of what that thing is saying and doing? Of course. That doesn't mean that they're possessed, because they're filled and possessed with the Holy Spirit. But that doesn't mean that they can't listen. Just like you can listen to a lie of the world and go after that. It's the same thing with evil spirits, that they're there. You can allow them to speak to you and you can believe them and you can give them authority over your life. But here's the thing, is that if we understand that we are citizens of heaven, then not even Satan has authority over us. Right? And that's the key. Right? When the Israelites are going out into these other nations, what God is telling them is, don't go after them, because those are useless gods. You're my possession. Know who you are. And I think within the church, we get into this, we used to do deliverance ministry stuff, and I think there's definitely true things that are in there that are really good. But sometimes we give so much credit to demons that you're not understanding your authority. It doesn't matter if it's this demon or that demon, or if it's Satan, or if it's this ruler or that ruler. We've been given authority. They're disarmed. It doesn't matter. That when Jesus says, I've given you power over all the power of the enemy, nothing shall injure you, he was telling the truth. That we should not fear at all any sort of spiritual beings. We should know that greater is he who is in us. And I think that's the big thing we're going to talk about in a few weeks.
I mean, just an example of, the things that are offered to idols.
Yes.
And heathens, because it really doesn't matter.
Sure. Yeah.
But, it's like, how do you talk to them that, oh, well, I watch Stranger Things. Now I've opened a portal. Or I've opened a portal into my life because I watch Stranger Things. Now I can deliverance from that.
Yeah, I mean, could that be true that they did open up a door? Possibly. But, I mean, I think sometimes that can go a little too far, honestly. I've seen it go too far. And so I would say, understand your authority. First off, yeah, don't do stuff that's just opening up doors. Like, don't walk as children of light and not as sons of darkness, and I think that's an important part of it. I think sometimes can it go too far with the deliverance thing? Yeah, absolutely. So hold on one second. You got one more. Go.
So the 8 continents in our world and the oceans, the islands, where there are spiritual battles happening in each continent that are similar to what is happening in the United States. So our focus
Sure.
sometimes becomes just our
Right.
United States.
Right.
But the breakdown of families, devaluing
Yeah.
human life,
Yeah.
protesting.
Everywhere.
That all this is happening on a global scale.
Right.
Where we need to know our enemy, not so much just in the United States,
Yes.
but the entire world.
Sure, I agree. Yeah, and you're right. And they operate differently over different nations. Absolutely. Go ahead, Bill. One more.
Okay, back to what you were talking about a minute ago.
Yes.
Can a Christian who's never touched a drop of alcohol in his life call it alcohol? The answer is yes.
Yes.
Can he be delivered from that?
Yes.
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 That's demonic.
You're right. Right. Yes, you're right. So yeah, I agree. All right. That's good. I like it. All right, guys, we got to go. It's already 10 o'clock. So, Lord, I pray you be with us today, Lord. Let us walk in authority, Lord, as citizens of heaven. In Jesus' name, amen.